Join me now as I welcome Jasmuheen to the Millennium Cafe. Welcome, Jasmuheen. Are you there?
Yes, I am, Steve. How are you?
Welcome. I'm fine. Well, I understand that you're from Australia and that you're in the United States right now, and you're a breatharian.
Well, I don't actually call myself a breatharian because, strictly speaking, breatharians don't either drink or eat, but I do like to have the odd social cup of tea, so I actually call myself someone who's being nourished by prana.
Well, maybe for the purpose of the interview, I'll call you a breatharian, but we'll qualify that by saying that you do like to drink a cup of tea now and then.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I think the audience is probably very curious as to what a breatharian is, and maybe we could start with a definition. What is a breatharian?
Well, as I said, strictly speaking, it's somebody who chooses not to eat or drink, and in my understanding anyway, Wiley Brooks may have a slightly different understanding of that. As Wiley says, it's someone who really breathes God, which is what we all do.
Mm-hmm.
But we get our nourishment from what the Christians would call the light of the God force, or what Reiki people would say the universal force, or what the Indian yogis would say prana. So we're actually nourished by another source of nourishment other than the way people normally take nourishment, which is via food consumption.
So you're saying that all human beings are actually nourished by prana, whether they eat or not?
They can be. It's just that we have very powerful minds that have led us to believe through social conditioning and circumstance over the last few millennia that we really do need to survive by eating food. But depending on what research you do, when human beings were originally incarnated on this planet, we were actually fed by light, by the higher light energy of what people would call the God force.
I understand that. I remember once, many years ago, in my hometown library, I found this very old book about Lemuria. It was tagged and tattered, and talked about these large beings who lived off of light.
Yeah, they're telepathic and androgynous and cloned by thought, produced by thought. And this was a long, long time ago before we actually entered into the cycle of life and death that we now know, and became denser and started to take food substance and nourishing substance from the lower realms.
Well, it's interesting to me, this whole thing about living off light. That I was curious to find out when you actually first became aware of this idea of breatharianism, and where did you find out about it?
I think, like many people, I probably first came across it in a book called Autobiography of a Yogi,
right.
The Yogananda work, and in there they were talking about Teresa Newman, who had a wafer every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. That was her only sustenance the whole week. And also Giri Bala, and she lived in the Himalayas for something like 58 years at the time of writing of the book, and she didn't drink or eat. But when I read that information, it wasn't like, oh yeah, fantastic, that's what I have to do. But about 10 years after reading that book, I came across information working with the Ascended Masters, and channeled information that talked about a process that we describe in my book, Living on Light, that in essence is about matching frequency with the divine force within, and a byproduct of that is that it will feed you if you decide to allow it to.
So your book is called Living on Light.
Yeah.
I had a heck of a time trying to find this book in the United States. I understand that you are more well known in Micronesia, is that right?
Mainly
and in Europe?
Yeah, Europe, in Germany in particular. We haven't really had a lot of exposure in the United States at the moment, but we will in divine time, no doubt. But the book is available through the Nature's First Law people in San Diego, and also through Ingram's now. They're a major book distributor through the United States. And Ingram's.
So then you could get it by going down to a local bookstore. And
you should be able to, going down to any New Age bookstore and just asking Ingram's, the distributors, to check it out. And Amazon Online carry the German edition as well, and I think they're now carrying the English edition too. So it's finally getting out there, but yeah, most of our work's been focused in Europe for the last 3 years.
What's been the general press reaction to your claim of living on light and prana?
Well, it's varied, because when I first heard the information, to me it was just the next step in my personal journey. I'd been meditating for over 20 years, and I'd been a vegetarian, vegan, raw foodist virtually for the same amount of time. So it was just a very personal choice and personal lifestyle choice. And I found after I made the conversion process to living on light that most people didn't really want to know, and similarly with the press, same reaction generally amongst the public when people haven't been exposed to this type of information. There's huge realms of disbelief, you really push their buttons of acceptability, put it that way.
I can attest to that. This weekend I had a friend here from Portland, Oregon, and she's highly educated and is well-read and does interviews herself, and she had never heard of a breatharian, and I presented her with the idea, and I showed her the book, and she was just in a total state of disbelief.
Yeah.
And I began to really realize as I discussed this with people that this really does push their buttons, and I have other friends who will say, well, the reason I came to Earth in the first place is so that I could enjoy the food.
That's true too. And I think people often say to me, like, they fall into two camps. The camp of absolutely impossible, you couldn't possibly do this because they've never been exposed to this in the West before, although in the East amongst the yogis it's quite a common practice and has been for millennia. But that's
sort of in the realm of myth. You read it in autobiography of a yogi, and you think that's myth.
Yeah, it's kind of like belongs to the saints or, the holy people. But the fact of an average Western woman, for example, doing this, it's like it really pushes people's buttons because they either don't believe, or if they do believe it's possible because they have done a bit of research and been exposed to this from the yogic tradition, their attitude is, why on earth would you stop eating? I absolutely adore my food. But this is not just a personal journey, We are on a bit of a crusade, you could say, as far as the fact that every second a child dies of hunger-related diseases on this planet. And while we have major aid organizations helping in the redistribution of resources to address this problem, there are also other solutions coming through. And pranic nourishment is, whether we like it or not, nutrition for the new millennium. It's not going to go away. So we're doing a lot of research now in Europe, and we'll begin doing work with the scientific and medical communities next year to prove how it's possible and to track it and hopefully be able to apply it long-term regarding world hunger problems.
Well, I've had some time to study your website, which we'll give out a little later. You have a very wonderful and very interesting and densely packed with information website.
Yeah, it's a library.
Yeah, it's like a library. You can actually
free library, Cosmic Internet Academy, free library.
You can actually download a newsletter and things like that. But so I know one of your main reasons for being out there now is to promote this idea of breatharianism or pranic nourishment, as you call it, as a solution for world hunger.
Yeah.
But when when I first thought about that, I thought that, how is the press going to react? And I mentioned this to a few friends, and it just has the, on the surface level, it sounds like it's sort of a cruel hoax to say, you poor people, you've been starving all these years and in sickness and disease and living in little hovels, and really all you have to do is turn to God and you'll be nourished.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds great on one level, but on another level it sounds like a cruel joke.
Yeah. But
how do you get over that? How do you get past that?
Yeah, it's not that simple either. What we're involved in is actually a massive re-education program on the planet. I remember 20 years ago an Eastern guru saying that you don't give spirituality to the East, because they have lots of that. You give them food and you give them shelter and decent education. What you do is go into the West and give the Westerners, who have absolutely everything and are still miserable, spirituality, and then hopefully they become more focused on selfless service and altruism and start to redistribute some of the resources around the planet so that the people who are in need of food and shelter, etc., can be taken care of. So we're actually involved in a massive re-education program through the MAPS Ambassadry, which we talk a lot about on the website, that has political agendas, economic, social, and environmental agendas as well. And the main project we're involved with the Living on Light is the World Health, World Hunger Project.
Mm-hmm.
And this means hunger for health, hunger for happiness, hunger for wealth, hunger for life purpose, and all that as well. So it's a huge project. It's not just a matter of going into the third world countries and saying, well, dudes, you've would have liked to have told you this sooner, but change your belief systems and you don't have to die after all. It's more complex than that.
Well, I recently interviewed a woman named Linda Grover, who is the author of Tree Island, and she is also the founder of the Millennium Meal Project. Mm-hmm. It's her goal to have a meal together, the whole world actually, so everyone has something to eat by the Millennium changeover on 2001, January 1.
Yeah.
Maybe I should hook you up with her.
Yeah.
She just went off to Washington to pitch this idea to some of the politicians there.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a wonderful idea. But a large vision.
It is a large vision, but it's like, and I think that sometimes the media say to me, what on earth makes you think, you're one woman that you can make any difference on this planet? And it's like, but it's got to start somewhere, and we're not alone, We work with millions of alternative therapists across this planet, millions of people who are teaching meditation and spirituality, I guess, helping people remember that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And there's a mass revolution going on, on a social level through the New Age communities and through the religious communities and right across the world, because people are now saying, hey, we do have enough resources. They're just not equitably distributed. We do have everything we need here. How about we just start to focus on the commonalities that drive us as people instead of the differences that keep us in separation, and maybe we'll end up with the unity that we're seeking on this planet.
Well, it's a wonderful idea. Maybe we can get into that a little later again. I'd like to know, Jasmuheen, how long it's been since your last meal?
I can't remember. Because people always ask me that, but I never focus on food, It's not about whether you're eating or not eating. What it's about is that you have no need of food at all. And as I say to the press, if I never had food again, I wouldn't die. But it doesn't mean to say that if I travel a lot and I just came back through from Europe and didn't sleep for 5 nights. And after a few nights of not sleeping, if you want to sleep, sometimes I might take a little bit of potato, and that will bring the digestive process into play and lower my energy, and I can sleep for a couple of hours if that's what I'm wanting to do.
Well, that's sort of what Wiley Brooks has been telling me, that it actually helps to eat some, well, he calls it poison. Food is poison, that it brings him down to a level where he can actually function a little bit on the earth plane. Is that a problem for you?
It can be. When I first converted to Living on Light, there were days where I felt so multidimensional and expanded that the only reason I knew I was still on the planet was because I heard my footsteps and could see my shadow on the ground, So it is really important to be focused here now and to be active on the planet, because we do have work to do. The times are finished of us, well, in my reality anyway, of hanging out in the caves, being the yogis in the city and ignoring the world. There's a lot of work for us to do here to refine the existing system so the planet can operate how it could operate, in a way that benefits all. So it's important to be focused and to be grounded. But Wiley's got a slightly different reality and movie, you could say, to the work that I'm doing, but yet it's all part of the one picture, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I think it really boils down to what you believe and what you think.
Yeah, and also to what our individual work is here, Right. My reality is that we're, all on assignment with the God force, like God is our true employer, and we've come in like cosmic knights, instead of beam me up, Trekkie, it's beam me, or beam me up, Scotty, it's beam me down, Scotty, We're on the planet as people with a mission and work to do, and it's just nice to find what that is, which people call their life purpose, and get on with it and do it in joy and do it in grace and with integrity and impeccability.
Well, in reading your book, Living on Light, I remember seeing a passage, something about when you first became inspired by, I think it was a man named Eric Klein from the United States here.
Yeah.
and evidently there were some tapes that were rolling around. Then you had heard about someone who had actually ascended somewhere in your region there near Australia.
Yeah, that's what we were told, actually. So it's, on further investigation, it probably wouldn't fit my movie of what I would call ascension. However, it was certainly enough to get me intrigued and interested and involved in the whole process, which is exactly what was meant to occur.
Well, I'm very interested in this process called ascension, and I've actually interviewed a couple of people about that. Mm-hmm. So it's curious to me, because you said if you don't eat for a long period of time, and I assume that might also include not drinking very much, if at all, that you become so light that it's hard to really know you're in a body.
Yeah, exactly.
If you continued with that, would you actually get to the point of ascension, or would we call that death?
No, well, see, in my movie of reality, having studied ascension for a long time as well, my reality is that we are already ascended. Mm-hmm. That we exist in all planes of existence simultaneously. Like, we have an Elohim self, we have an angelic self, we have an ascended self, we have the earth human self, and just a very, very small part of our consciousness is actually held in physical form on this level of existence. So, we are all that we need to be. We are, as Wiley says, God in physical form, and it's just a matter of expressing that and allowing that aspect of our nature to radiate through our being into everyday reality. And when we do that, we find ourselves living in heaven on earth. So it really is, like the masters always say to me that the thing that travels faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought. So, thought has so much power to create reality and to put us into any different movie that we want, on this planet, because personal reality is just like a movie. So, many people have created many movies called Survival on Planet Earth, mm-hmm. but Ascensionists, or people like myself, are probably more interested in playing a movie called The Creation of Paradise on Earth, or The Revelation mm-hmm. of Paradise on Earth, which is, just giving ourselves the opportunity to express our full human potential, while in embodiment, rather than sort of moving our vehicles or our consciousness off this planet and ascending and leaving the plane.
I'm curious as to this process, how you move from being one who's sustained by food to one who's sustained by light. And you mentioned that long before you became a breatharian, or chronically nourished, as you say, that you had become a very light food eater, and that you were eating vegetarian and that sort of thing. Yeah. Is that a necessary part of the process? Do you know people who have gone from being a meatitarian directly to living off prana?
Yeah, and they can't sustain it. Like I often say to people, in a nutshell, the ability to live on light is the result of a certain level of physical fitness, emotional fitness, mental fitness, and spiritual fitness, and the desire to. Because there's a hell of a lot of people out there who've been working with the higher energies for a long time and are fit on all levels, but as your friends have said, they have no desire to stop eating because they get such huge pleasure from that. And that's fine. We say to people, if you like eating, then eat by all means. This isn't something for everybody at this time, but it certainly will become more and more established as the millennium progresses as an alternative option and way of life. But it is just that. It is just a lifestyle, and it does take a certain level of fitness. Mm-hmm. I've seen people go through the process of being very spiritually fit and very focused on their ascension, as you would call it, but they can't sustain it because they're not physically fit enough to maintain the high vibrational frequencies that are required to allow the divine force to feed us in this way. So, a lot of people go through the 21-day process and return to eating quite quickly, anywhere within 3-4 weeks to, a month or two, because they just can't sustain the frequencies involved.
Let's talk about that 21-day transition process a little bit. Would that be akin to a fast for those people then that can't sustain it?
No, definitely not. It's not about fasting at all. It's see, what happens when the physical body goes into a fast is, apart from detoxing and headaches, nausea, etc., depending on the how tuned the physical body is, the body starts to feed off itself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between this and fasting is that you're actually bringing through or revealing a higher dosage, a more potent dosage of the God force within, and it actually starts to nourish us, assuming we're commanding it to. It
Mm-hmm.
does take a high level of mind mastery, because one of the first things you have to do is to start to eliminate your limiting belief systems, like the first one being, if I'm not eating or drinking, I'm going to waste away to nothing, you know, and that's why people do tend to lose weight. So it's very important that you reprogram the body to have its weight stabilize at the perfect level to fully manifest the divine self. You know, that's one of the most important things as well. So it's not like a fast, it's simply a matching of frequencies of the Divine One within, and then a little byproduct of that, apart from increased clairvoyance, telepathy and things like that, is that it will also feed us if we decide to allow it to.
So people that decide to go through the 21-day transition process that you've developed, do they have to do it in a group seminar sort of situation, or can they do it on their own?
No, the whole reason we wrote the book was that people did it on their own, you know, because we really feel that it's a spiritual initiation for a spiritual warrior. Like the Druids spent something like 30 years getting in training for some of the initiations their priests went through. Well, I spent 25 years getting in training consciously for this, although I wasn't aware all those years that that's what I was doing, obviously.
Right.
And I found from, you know, like there's been about 5,000 people in the world involved in this now, and they're all tough and they're all well trained, but those who are the best prepared find the journey easier and the initiation most beautiful. Someone who has not detoxed their body, who's been drinking a lot of alcohol, eating a lot of meat, who are untrained, obviously they have a lot of problems going through the initiation process, because they've got detox problems to deal with, and a whole heap of other issues come up as well. So it's kind of like, you know, you don't just send the man out in the street to run a triathlon. You know, you get him well prepared or her well prepared so that they can handle the rigors of the triathlon. And it's the same with this. You know, people really, really need to be well prepared. And because if they're not, you know, like if the general man in the street who had not been working on spiritual levels and other levels, if they were to stop eating tomorrow, they would die.
Well, that's because of the belief system.
And also, too, because if you don't get your nourishment from food, where's it going to come from? If you don't believe in God, well, how can God feed you?
Good point.
So, like, the whole reason that we're alive and kicking is because we have not just a strong belief system in the divine force, but an experience of the divine force. Like, I recommend that people who undergo the 21-day process, firstly, be aware that they create their own reality. You know, and not just as far as a conceptual understanding, but as an experiential understanding. And that secondly, that they already have a good communication established with the divine force within, so they can trust their inner guidance. Because a lot of things happen during the 21-day initiation process that you really need to be able to sit and meditate on and tune in and get your guidance about. You know, and to be able to trust that as well.
So if you're going through this 21-day transition process, would it be advisable not to be working and doing things like that?
Yeah, we recommend in the book that people treat it like a 3-week invitation to go visit God, you know, and put it on that level of importance. So you disassociate yourself from family and friends and work and all the rest of it. And there's more reasons than just the sacredness of the initiation, but also too because there's a lot of changes happening energetically with the body, and it's important to be in a supportive environment while these changes take place.
What would you recommend to the people in this area who are hearing this program if they wanted to do this? And there's no support around here.
Well, that's the whole idea. It's written for spiritual warriors to take yourself through the process. You know, like we didn't have support when we did it. There were no books, there was no manuals. We were just listening to telepathic guidance, you know, that we were receiving from the Ascended Masters. But the most powerful guide that we have, the most powerful teacher and caretaker is the God within us.
Jasmuheen, we have to take a break here.
Thank you.
I have Jasmuheen in the cafe today. She's the author of Living on Light. You're listening to the Millennium Cafe, and this is Steve Fryer. We'll be right back with more on pranic nourishment and breatharianism right after this. Stay with us. And we're back. This is Steve Fryer. You're in the Millennium Cafe, and my guest today is Jasmuheen, who is a breatharian and a pranic nourishment person, I guess you'd say, author of Living on Light, and she doesn't eat food, at least not very often, as you describe it. And I understand you do drink a little bit.
Yeah.
But not alcohol.
Oh, no.
What's your favorite nourishment besides prana?
Well, none actually, and I think that's what's so freeing about this, is to have the freedom of choice, like to not have to need any food at all, especially when you're traveling the world. I go through phases, after a couple of years of not eating, it actually got a little boring, as you can imagine, and I missed flavor, so I would have, a piece of chocolate now and then just for fun, but
well, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Nourishment.
I'm really curious about that. In your book, you talk about the feeding of the various bodies, and I think there are 3 or 4?
Yeah, the emotional body is the real problem, because it's the one that's actually addicted to food, and everyone across America could swear to that, I'm sure, because, if we were eating just to feed the physical body, then everyone would be a lot more aware in what they're choosing to the physical body. But we don't. We often eat for our emotional addictions and pleasure, to pleasure the emotional body. And
well, it's interesting. I have a friend who has actually written a book about that, about cravings, and her name is Dr. Doreen Virtue.
Yeah.
She actually lives down where you are, near San Diego and Los Angeles. She'll hear this program. And I highly recommend her book, because what she's done as a PhD is gone through and listed all the various kinds of food that people are addicted to, and the kind of response that it invokes.
Yep.
It's really what you're talking about. This emotional body is like this naughty little kid.
It is.
Or an undisciplined kid, I should say, that needs to be satisfied by the various sensations produced by eating the various kinds of food. So I guess I'm wondering, in stating all this, how you got over that. Now, that's probably the biggest problem right there, because when I think about giving up food, there's certainly a lot of food I should give up. Chocolate, peanuts are my favorite.
Don't they say chocolate's food of the gods, though, Steve?
Well, I'm kind of addicted to Reese's peanut butter cups. I have to admit that. But, after I've eaten, I don't feel always that good. But later, intellectually, I think, well, I would love to be, chronically nourished. I wouldn't have to worry about food bills or what I'm going to order in a bad restaurant. And believe me, there are a lot of bad restaurants.
There's no shopping.
Yeah, you save a lot of money.
Dishes, you save all this money. It's true. On that level, it's really easy. And on a physical body level, the physical body really loves to be pranically nourished, because it just goes directly to the source for all its nutrition, straight to the God force. And so it's very clean and very easy, and the weight will stabilize after a while, because we do use mind mastery to bring that under control, and our energy levels end up very high, and we don't need to sleep much either, because we're not wasting all this energy through the process of digestion. That's easy, but what everybody finds when they've gone through the conversion process is the real difficulty begins with the emotional body, because we have fed our emotional body for years, through food to greater or lesser degrees, and in many other lifetimes as well, when we've always been eating. So it does become like a naughty little child that tends to rear its head now and then and wants the pleasure of food, particularly socially too. Because people don't know what to do with you when you're not eating. Nobody invites you out to dinner anymore. You're a cheap date.
That's the other thing that I really came to realize, that we are social beings, and nearly all of our getting together with people revolves around having lunch or dinner or a big feast like Thanksgiving, and here we are, with the holiday season.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing. It really is. Like 90% of people go back to eating now and then, simply because of social reasons, not because they need it, And that's why I find it's really funny with America's reaction to people like Wiley. If he gets sprung, in a cafe or something, it's really crazy, because people tend to think it's black and white. You either eat or you don't eat.
That's
but it's not about that. It's whether or not we need to eat, and learning to deal deal with our emotional body addictions to food. Like, it's been 5.5 years since I've had a meal, you know. However, I am still emotionally addicted now and then to the whole pleasure that comes from being in a social group and breaking bread and sharing food. And when I'm in those situations now and then, I'll just have a little light bowl of broth or something just to feel like I'm part of the theme. You know, because it is very difficult dealing with our emotional body's addiction to just the whole social bonding that happens around food. Like, I have a friend of mine in Australia, and he has one meal once a week, you know, just on Sundays with his family, and the rest of the time he chooses not to eat.
So then he probably spends the rest of the week purging the food.
I don't think he eats much. I think it's quite light. But, you know, he just likes to be part of that whole social game.
Well, it's interesting. I was in a bookstore, the East West bookstore recently in Mountain View, and they have some wonderful books on the Ascended Masters. And one of them I started reading was talking about the practices of Saint Germain.
Yeah.
And evidently, maybe you could tell us a little bit about who Saint Germain is, because I know by reading it, having read your website, that you are into the Ascended Masters and can actually dialogue with them.
Yeah.
And Saint Germain, I understand, is a favorite of yours.
Yeah, he's been working a lot with me. In fact, you know, it was after I found it quite interesting because, as I said to you off air, you know, like, I've never had this sort of like powerful awakening in near-death experience or realization on a mountaintop. I just meditated every day for 20-odd years and gradually became more and more telepathic until eventually I became aware of the Ascended Ones, Ascended Masters in my life, and Saint Germain was the first major contact that I had.
Now, when was he famous for having lived?
I'm not sure exactly, but I know it was a few centuries ago because he's had many different embodiments. Some sources say that he was Joseph, the father of Jesus. Other people say that he was the Merlin energy. In fact, I know him very strongly to carry the master magician energy of Merlin. And, you know, we're seeing a huge rise of Camelot again, and the new series of books I'm actually writing, because the Living on Light book is one of 8 books I've done, and the next 4 are focusing on Camelot, the return of Camelot, as I'm working with Saint Germain on that. But he lived in Europe for many, many centuries, and he was an immortalist in that he maintained a youthful appearance of a gorgeous man of about 45 for many centuries, and was a master swordsman and a master linguist and an alchemist, and could do just pretty well amazing things, including manifesting diamonds and jewels and a lot of other things as well.
Well, in this book I read that he was a favorite of the courts in France and so forth during the time just before the revolution.
Yes, and he warned, you know, the monarchy and the hierarchies about the revolution, that it was coming and that they should be aware, and they just chose to ignore that warning. But he's very involved in social justice. Like, he was involved in the writing of the Declaration of Independence in the Americas, and he's just rewritten on our website that declaration to be read now as the Declaration of Interdependence, and people are most welcome to go and have a look at that and to add to that as well if they'd like to. And he's very involved in social change, and he was the one who manifested before me a few years ago and asked if I was prepared to come out of the closet, so to speak, with the Living on Light and start to work with the world media regarding the ability to live on light. You know, as he said, it would gain attention and it's sensational, and it would allow them to share age-old messages again using the media, which they feel to be a very powerful re-education tool on the planet at this time.
Well, evidently from the writings that I read, that he would dine with the royalty, but was such a good conversationalist that they rarely noticed that he didn't eat.
Yeah, he was never seen to be eating or drinking in public, you know. And, very, very fascinating energy. I mean, I adore him. I talk to the Ascended Masters all day, every day, as if they're listening. I don't really care whether they are or not. I just assume that the thought patterns are registered with the universal forces.
Is this something that is going on right now?
Yeah, well, we just send out messages, you know, like I just, for example, Saint Germain's my media representative, you know, and every time I'm to talk to a journalist or TV or something like that, because we do a lot of that around the world, I just say, okay, bring me the next reporter, please. And someone will ring within an hour, often from across the planet. So I don't have to chase anything. I just tell them to bring it to me, and they do. But we had a deal going that if I was going to work with the media, he could only send me the nice ones.
What other Ascended Masters do you work with?
Well, I see, it's very interesting. The Ascended Masters work with millions and millions of people right around the planet, either consciously or unconsciously. Often a lot of teachings happen on the night realms when people put their bodies down to sleep and their beings move out of their body and they go off for training on other realms. And when you dedicate your life to service, which means basically all you want to do is to serve in the unfoldment of the divine plan on Earth, then it's like registering in a cosmic university, and you get assigned different professors or tutors or lecturers depending on what your field of specialty is going to be in service on Earth. That's the simplest way to put it. So I worked very strongly with Sananda Energy, the Christed Consciousness, for a few years. With Mother Mary, I continue to work. She tutors me a lot in areas of mercy and compassion and unconditional love. With the goddess Kuan Yin as well. With Kutumi. Kutumi had a lifetime as Pythagoras and Francis of Assisi, and was instrumental in formulating the MAPS ambassadry that we talk a lot about on the Cosmic Internet Academy, and Saint Germain, of course, as well, and the Arcturian energies. They're the masters of light, of the high light science, of the light technologies. So these guys are on planet Earth, in other dimensions of reality, you could say, existing in other movie theaters, but quite accessible, providing we find the ticket to the theater, and that ticket is our willingness. Just our willingness to have our life here make a positive difference. Is
it necessary to be a light food eater or a breatharian to contact these
not at all.
Ascended Masters?
It's just a desire. It really is. Like, I remember after 20-odd years of meditation, I finally figured out that all I had to do was ask and I would receive, as Jesus says. And it's that simple, like if we want to have our lives here make a positive difference, and we recognize that it's too big a job to perhaps do on our own, that we do require to work as a team on a physical level, then we also realize that we can work as a team on an etheric level as well. Like one of the things the Masters gave me, the great gifts they gave me a few years ago, was the understanding that we have all these unemployed angels hanging around,
Unemployed angels, I like that.
Unemployed angels, like God sent these angels to Earth to help us in this time of transition into the new millennium, and 86% of people believe in the angelic realms, according to American statistics, but nobody knows what to do with them. And so the Master said, well, how about you start employing them, to do work for you, so that you can get the work that you've agreed to do in service to the divine done on Earth with maximum impact and minimum effort. So I started employing all the angels, and it's amazing. They work really fast and really well and really powerfully, and they're great cosmic secretaries, and it's fantastic time management.
Now, being a breatharian, does that mean you don't have to exercise? Is exercise important?
No, to the contrary. I believe very much that the physical vehicle is the temple that allows the Divine One to radiate its presence onto Earth, through us as a physical portal of energy. And the fitter we are, the more powerfully we can attract and hold and transmit these energies of the Divine Force. So strong body, very much. I do, 2-3 hours of exercise a day, some days at home, you doing yoga and dance, and even walking on my treadmill and weightlifting and swimming and things like this as well. Yeah.
Now, I talked to Wiley Brooks a while back, and he said that he could lift 1,100 pounds.
Yeah.
Being a breatharian, and that it gives him more strength.
Yeah, me too. I'm much stronger now that I live online. I spent my whole life as an athlete doing all sorts of athletic endeavors, and as I shared, as meditating for a long time and exercising, etc. And I have never attained the level of fitness and strength that I now have after 5 years of just being pranically nourished. It's really quite amazing.
I assume that another benefit of being a breatharian is that your health may be a lot better, and that you have less likelihood for disease. But we have to take a break here, Jasmuheen.
Okay.
We'll be right back. In the next segment, we'll finish up with that. Jasmuheen's my guest in the Millennium Cafe today, and her book is Living on Light. Just one of her, how many books? 8 books?
Yeah, we have 6 volumes of received teachings from the Ascended Masters.
Well, we'll be right back right after this.
Thanks.
Stay with us. And we're back. This is Steve Fryer. You're listening to the Millennium Cafe, and in the cafe today is Jasmuheen. Living on Light is her book, the source of nourishment for the new millennium. And we've only got a few minutes left here, so I want to give out some contact information here for the listeners. You have a wonderful website, which I mentioned, and to find it, I think you could just punch in your web browser, Jasmuheen, and I'll spell that. It's Jasmuheen.
Yeah.
Jasmuheen. Interesting name. And otherwise, you could also punch in www.selfempowermentacademy.com.au, which stands for Australia.
Yeah.
All right. And there's some wonderful newsletters and so forth, and information on where to order the book and so forth, or the various books. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I guess I'll turn it over to you. You might have a couple of words to say about self-empowerment or whatever.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think it's good for listeners to be aware that, one, not to just stop eating tomorrow, because you could encounter all sorts of problems. You know, it's something you really need to have to be well trained for and research it. You know, get the information, read the book before you proceed with this, and also take it slowly. You know, this is actually a path of self-mastery. There's no rush. It does require a high level of fitness on all levels, and also the desire. You know, it isn't everybody's cup of tea, but in time, I'd like to think that we can eliminate the slaughter of animals on this planet. You know, to me personally, that's my personal agenda, you could say. My personal interest is that we eliminate the senseless slaughter of animals on this plane. And maybe we end up with vegetarian cafes, you know, and maybe McDonald's will become vegetarian. I mean, who knows? But remember, there was a time where people thought you couldn't walk on the moon, and there was a time where people thought the Earth was flat. So it's nice to think that people keep an open mind and are prepared to put in a little bit of daily discipline in lifestyle choice to be the masters of themselves and find the guru within, so we can work together and have a good time on this planet instead of being in lack and limitation. Hey?
Very noble goal. How many breatharians or pranic nourishers would you say are out there, Jasmuheen?
The masters tell me about 5,000. It's very hard to keep track because the book was written so that people could just take the information and put themselves through the process in the privacy of their own home without needing clubs or networks, because this is very much for the spiritual warrior. So it is hard to track. You know, in the last year or so, there's been over 2,000 just in Germany. But then the Germans are very open to this type of work as well, and our other book, In Resonance, has been number 2 on their bestseller list in the New Age communities for a while, so they like this sort of stuff.
That's amazing, because I come from German stock myself.
And, there you go.
You know, I've really never liked German food. It's so heavy. Every time I've gone into a German restaurant, I usually don't go to German restaurants, but I think that's a sign that if you were going to become a breatharian, you're probably headed more toward the lighter foods anyway, are you not?
And they're an interesting culture, you know. They've done a lot regarding the reunification of their own country since the Berlin Wall's come down, and they're very open.
We've got to end the show here, unfortunately, so if you want to get in touch with Jasmuheen, punch in her name, Jasmuheen, into your web browser and see what comes up. You'll probably get to selfempowermentacademy.com. Thank you for being with us on the Millennium Cafe. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.